Good. Well, hi, everybody. I'm really glad you're here today because we're going to talk about negotiation. And why are we talking about negotiation on Love Sweet Love, which focuses on our connectedness and social health? Well, because negotiations don't just happen at work, they also happen in our everyday lives within many of our relationships, such as our partners, our bosses, our kids, and our neighbors. And how we manage these negotiations for what we want and need can very much affect these relationships. And also, we're approaching that holiday season, and some of us end up spending more time than we normally do. I was going to say normally want. I guess that's sometimes the case with lots of family, lots of people with differing opinions, various dynamics going on with personalities that sometimes clash, and with people who are sometimes overtired and stressed. So, we need strategies for how we can get through these upcoming holiday times and remain sane while doing so. So, what will help us keep the peace, but also allow us to be our full selves? And is that even possible? That's what I want to talk to my guest about today. And are there things we can do to increase the chances of getting what we want and maintaining the relationships that we have? So, to talk with me about this today is an international expert on conflict resolution who has over 20 years of experience as a lawyer, negotiator, and a mediator. She's also the founder of two companies, an award winning author, and her expertise makes her a sought after authority across industries across the globe. So, Damali Peterman is here with us today, and Damali is the author of the award winning and best selling book, Negotiating While Black: Be Who You Are to Get What You Want. And it's available in over 72 countries and has won some prestigious honors, such as being included in the Forbes top 10 negotiation books, and in 2024 was listed as one of Essence's top 15 summer reads. And Damali's book has been celebrated for its insights on overcoming bias, embracing authenticity, and excelling in negotiations, cementing its place as a transformative resource for professionals and leaders worldwide. So, welcome, Damali. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, Gil. It's so wonderful to be here.
Thank you. So, I've been reading a lot of what you've written and listening to you speak, and it really is true that negotiations are something that we engage in all the time. Is that right?
Absolutely. Every day we have opportunities to negotiate, whether it's a negotiation within our own heads, right? So, am I going to go to the gym today? Will I eat that extra cookie?
Right.
Thinking about how you're going to spend your time, right?
Mm.
And of course, negotiating is outside of our own heads when we're talking to other people, whether we're talking about a loved one, a colleague, or even in a high stakes situation. They all have the same foundation. They all have the same foundation of really being able to communicate and to listen and to try to be who you are to get what you want.
Mhm. I want to ask you so many things about the book. I guess going back, I'm thinking I've heard you say that you're the oldest of seven kids.
Yes.
And so I would imagine that position in your family, or just even in a family of that size, negotiating probably came up with you as a kid. Is that true?
It's so true. And in fact, so many funny things. There's so many funny stories from being the oldest of seven. I told someone yesterday I only know how to make food for like 10 people or one person. There's no in between, Gil.
Yeah.
But also that's also kind of thinking about making something and trying to please different people. You're negotiating with different people. And where I was between parents and siblings, I also was a natural mediator, right? Because I
Mm.
was the oldest. And so that definitely shaped me as a negotiator. It gave me many opportunities to negotiate before I had formal
Mhm.
training.
I bet. So what you wear lots of different hats, as I've said in the introduction. And so how do you spend your time these days? Like what are you mostly focusing on out of all those things that you do?
Well, I love this question. I'll tell you about this week, right?
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
it changes week to week. I am a mediator. I mediate with a very prestigious organization called JAMS, where I help people resolve conflict. And usually we're talking about everything from commercial disputes to employment matters to cryptocurrency. There's a whole gambit of things that I focus on. And so I'm asked to literally step in the middle of conflict on a regular basis. And so I spend a lot of my time doing that. I also train mediators globally. So what I've been working on this week is my upcoming program in Kenya, where I'll be training not just mediators throughout the province, but also judges as well, which is amazing. Because in order to have mediation be adopted and accepted into any society, you have to have judicial backing, meaning
Mm,
people have to know that there's more to just thinking about your case going to court or saying I'm going to sue you and trying to have my day in court. There's more to it than that. There are alternative dispute resolution processes
mhm,
that could be better for you depending on the situation and can also expedite the solution, right? And
mm,
so that's something that I do globally.
mhm.
um, I've also been working on my new book, by the way. You're the first to hear it.
Oh, good. I was
And
gonna ask you if you have another book because I just think you must have
yeah.
so much information to share with people.
I do. So, on a weekly basis, I'm usually on the news or writing an article or being fortunate enough to be a guest on a podcast like you have here me here today. And in the background, I'm working on other projects that are ongoing. So one, a workbook for my book. So you mentioned the name of my hardcover book, Negotiating About Black. It also came out the same time as Be Who You Are to Get What You Want internationally. And then Penguin released it as a paperback version this year as well. And so I'm working on a workbook to accompany that book. So it give people more interactive opportunities to
Mm,
improve their negotiation skills. And I just pitched a children's book. And you'll love this, Gail, because as we were
yeah,
chatting, we were talking about intergenerational
yeah. And I've been a
reality.
teacher my whole life. That's what I just retired from. Yeah.
That's
Mhm,
right. That's right. I did
mhm.
read that you're a teacher. So you would love this. It's actually
Yeah,
focused on middle grade. So
yeah,
from age 8 to age 12.
yeah.
And I pitched it last week and it went over very well. So I'll be working on a children's book, a graphic novel. And it's focusing on teaching children how to resolve conflict, how to negotiate. Because imagine, Gail, imagine
Oh, love it.
adults had a lot of these skills when they were children, and they have
Yes.
all these years and decades to improve and hone their skills, how much better they would be at negotiating. So that's what I'm working on.
Oh, that is so fantastic. I love that. I mean, we definitely teach kids about, um, using I messages and having a clear statement about what you want. And, so there's little bits of it, but I think this is going to be so valuable for kids and for teachers. That's great. I can't wait till that comes out. When do you think it's going to come out?
We'll
Like in a
see.
year?
So, well, traditional publishing
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
a couple of years.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure that conflict never goes out of style. And
Yes.
middle school conflict, that's been going on since the start of time. And
Yeah.
so even if it comes out in a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, with traditional publishing, there'll still be a need for it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That's great. So, what about you? I know you have kids of your own. So, this is funny talking about being for me being a teacher, and I know you're an educator too. You teach. My kids sometimes will go like, "Ugh," especially when they were growing up, like, "Mom, don't do it, be a teacher, don't teacher me." And they would listen to what their teacher said. But for me, even though I was a teacher, they'd say, "My teacher says this, Mom." So, like with your kids, do they like call you out when you're using your negotiation and mediation skills with them, or and do they use them with you?
My kids are excellent negotiators. Oh man, Gail, I taught them too well. They will negotiate with me. Do they call me out? You know what's funny? I never get called out for being a mediator.
Mhm.
In a previous life, people would say, "Oh, don't lawyer me," right? That
Lawyer.
that
Yeah.
felt like people could they felt like that was happening. And I'm not lawyering you right now, right? Um, but with my kids. I think what I'm most proud of, and I'm proud of many things. My boys are wonderful. I have a preteen and a teen, and
Mhm,
they keep me on my toes, two boys. And
mhm.
what I love about them that I'm most proud of is that they feel very confident, advocating for themselves, even if they're going up against an adversary who's literally written a book on negotiating. Um,
Yeah,
and and I love that they will try, and they're very effective, right?
yeah.
But yeah, no, they don't usually call me out, but like any other kid, I embarrass them all the time, right? Like all the time.
Oh, that's great. I bet they're gonna be, amazing negotiators with your tutelage at home, so, okay, let's talk a little bit more about your book, and, the subtitle of the hardcover is "Be Who You Are and Get What You Want," and Um, yeah, just I really wanted you to talk about why you wanted to have that about being who you are and still being able to get what you want in the subtitle. And was that a central part of why you wrote the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's the subtitle of that book, and that's the title of the international version and the paperback version.
Right.
And it was really important to me to have that. And that's my original subtitle, by the way.
Mm,
Oftentimes, when books are acquired, they may be changed. The original title or subtitle could be
right.
changed. But all of that, those are my original title and subtitle,
Mm,
which is negotiation.
yeah, then that's a big accomplishment, right? To
Yeah.
keep it. Yeah.
It in there. So I'll say that it was really important to me because in these sort of canon of books on negotiations, what I thought was the takeaway from many of those books was in order to be successful, you have to be like fill in the blank person, oftentimes a male, older,
White.
really white, right? Like
Yeah.
all of that. And if you
Yeah.
do what he did, you will be
Mhm.
successful too. And I was like, how does that actually work? Like, yeah, maybe if most of the people who are reading the books look like this guy and they're being perceived the way this guy is being perceived, then maybe they'll be successful. But how can I abandon how I show up in the world, right?
Mm,
How can that not be perceived as a strength? And
mhm,
if I felt that way, I thought that other people who are looking to improve their negotiation skills or even see themselves as a negotiator. I
mhm,
travel globally talking about my book, and I can tell you that there are people who don't see themselves even as a negotiator.
mhm,
And I'll tell you quickly, I
mhm.
was at a cooking class in New Orleans with my mom and my sister, and there were a few nurses who were there on the girls' weekend, and they were lovely. And my mom, being the proud mom, was telling everyone, "Oh, my daughter has a book coming out." I'm like, "Mom, I'm just trying to learn how to make gumbo or whatever." Like I just want to be a regular person just learning how to cook, right? It wasn't gumbo, it was actually barbecue chicken, but it was delicious. Um, and then one of the nurses said, "Well, I don't have to negotiate in my job. I'm a nurse, I've been a nurse for a long time." And I said to her, "Well, do patients always do what you want them to do?" And she started laughing. She said, "No, of course not." And I was like, "Well, what do you call it when you're
Mm,
communicating with the patient and trying to get them to see things your way?" And she goes, "Well, I guess that's negotiating." But her initial reaction was, "I don't negotiate in my job." And she's a nurse interacting with people who you can't control. And
mhm,
so the be who you are to get what you want was important because I wanted people to see, no matter who they were and what their professions were or where they lived, or what or their experience, exposure, education, etc., that they didn't have to become someone else to be effective. They could use what they had and, I'll use the word upgrade it a bit,
yeah.
to get to that next level of really being a powerful person and negotiations and getting what they wanted and getting what they wanted more consistently. So that was really important to me. It was important for me for people to walk away knowing that they didn't have to be someone else to get what they wanted.
Mhm, mhm. And in the book, you talk about um, one thing that's in common, I guess you could say, because we're talking about things that are unique to each situation. But I think you say that there are five elements in every negotiation. And I think they are, correct me if I'm wrong, know what you want, what you need, how to listen closely, how to communicate, and when to close the deal. So I had a couple of questions about those. Number one was what's the difference between what you want and what you need?
Oh, I love this. And I love this too because the title of your podcast, of course, it's like there are many wonderful things about it, but it's also like a song, right?
Of
You know, what
course, it's
the
all
world
based on that.
right? What the
Yeah,
world needs now is love,
exactly.
sweet
Sweet
love,
love.
right?
Yep.
And one of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about the difference between what you want and what you need is also a song lyric. You may not
Mhm.
always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you
Yes.
you need.
Try sometimes, get what you need.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So wants and needs are different. Want is what you
Yeah.
the sort of the what, right? I want a raise. I want a new car. I
Mhm,
want to be married when I'm 30, right? Whatever people are saying they want. The need is the why, right?
mhm,
I want a raise so that I can go back to school. I
mhm,
want a new car so I can have reliable transportation to get from point A to point B. I want to be married when I'm 30 because that was my mother's dream and she passed away when I was a child and I want to fulfill her dream, right? There are different needs that fuel wants. And oftentimes when there is a breakdown in communication or a breakdown where conflict seems to kind of seep through is where people are focusing on what they think they want as opposed to kind of peeling the onion back a little bit to identify what they need. And
yeah,
they aren't always the same.
no,
So that's something that comes up a lot. There are many ways that people have talked about it. Positions versus interests. Position is a want, and interest is the need. And
mhm,
so it's so important because when you're stuck, for anyone who's listening, when
mhm,
you are stuck on trying to get what you want,
mhm.
if you try, sometimes you might get what you need by
Mhm.
asking yourself, why do I want this?
That's so important. It's almost, would you say, to me, it seems like almost like a bigger picture. Like the need is like a bigger picture thing. Like, why am
Yeah.
I striving for this anyway?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, like a lot of people ask me questions a lot about salary negotiations or new job opportunities, and I always tell them, and it always is a strong word, right? Like always, but this is something that I always say is don't get too stuck on some of the what I call like the four corners of the offer, right?
Mhm,
Think about why you want what you want. So, for example, if the salary range or max is I'm just going to throw out a number, $100,000, just throwing out a number,
mhm,
$100,000, and you want a salary of 125, right? And you're kind of pushing for that because that's what you want. But if you ask yourself, why do I want this? You may realize that you want to go back to school. And if you realize that, then you can stop focusing on the fact that they may be saying, no, we don't have that. We haven't budgeted that amount. That we can't do that. To if do you have a tuition reimbursement program, right?
mhm.
Because the company could have that, but if you're
Yeah.
focusing on just the I want this specific amount, you may lose the opportunity to get, sort of why you need that amount. Or, I want to put more money into a 401(k) or whatever it is. If you expand your thinking, which is what you're asking me, right? If
Yeah.
you expand it, if you have more creative options and solutions, if you kind of move away from the why, the what or the want to the sorry, if you move away from the what, sort of that, what you want
Mhm.
to kind of the why you want it to the need, then you can expand the pie. So I think it's really important for people to think about that. And most people, if you think about the last argument you had, right? Or think about the last conflict you have, what was going on? Was the person articulating what they wanted? Did they convey at some point in the conversation why they wanted that? Did they need something? If you think about, all these situations where you watch on TV or on TV, on movies or whatever streaming platform, couples that are arguing, right? And it may be like, oh, you didn't do the dishes, but that's not the issue. That's what they're saying. But the
Mm,
person may feel underappreciated, right?
yeah.
So there are different ways to look at it, but I think that the first step is to separate the want from the need.
Mm, I think that's great advice. I can think of a lot of examples right away. And what about listening closely? I think that's a really important one. And I think people might, assume when they first think about negotiation is you're doing the talking and maybe not really focusing on how important listening is. Why do you say it's so important?
Listening is, to me, the most important thing you can do in a conversation. And active listening is important because, like you said, most people when they're preparing to speak, they're thinking about their tone. They're thinking about, different places they're very, the subject. They're thinking about the subject matter expertise they may have. They're thinking about many things. It just depends on what the speaking is for. But rarely do people practice how to listen, right? Rarely do they practice sort of, what I call sort of different ways that you can actively listen. There's six that I like to teach people where you are now in the place of thinking about how to listen and not only hear what's being said, but also to pick up on nonverbal cues, also to hear what's not being said. If the person is saying this, what are they trying to say? Like, everyone doesn't always say what they mean, and people don't always mean what they say, right? And
Right.
so oftentimes people are reacting to what a person said, whatever the words they chose were, but not always taking a step back to kind of ask some open-ended questions, get more information, and sort of let the moment sit. So one of the things that I tell people to do is to just count to three, right, before you respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about what one would call a pregnant pause, right? But just give your brain a chance to sort of really take in what the person said and not a reactive mode, but more of a sort of listening to understand mode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that 3 seconds can make a big difference rather than us blurting something out. Do you think, is there something that you've noticed that a lot of people get wrong in negotiations? Like, is there one or
Oh,
two things that there are probably lots of things?
I think that's a great question, Gail. Um, I think people get wrong oftentimes the why.
Mm,
Like why someone is asking for something. And
mhm,
so in some of my big negotiations, many dollars at stake, what I would often spend a lot of time on is not what people were asking for, right? Because when you're negotiating contracts, especially big contracts, some things that are often like overly analyzed are things about like liability, right? Like shifting liability and who's going to be responsible if X,
mhm,
Y, or Z happens, right?
mhm,
And what I would try to focus on is why. Why are they asking for this? And this can be applied to any negotiation. Even if your kid
mhm,
comes up to you, and this has happened to me many times where my kid has asked me for something and I focus on what they were saying without understanding the why, right?
mhm,
And then I have to peel it back and understand the why. Maybe there's a reason that they want to do this specific thing and they're telling you what they want, but I don't know why they're asking for it. Like
mhm,
what events could have triggered that ask. So in these negotiations, I think oftentimes people get wrong not figuring out the why.
mhm,
And when I was talking about having like these high stake negotiations and trying to figure out the why, sometimes the why could be I just started working here. I want to make a good impression. I want to show that I'm a hard negotiator. Or the why could be I just had a loss yesterday. I lost in a contract, and so I really got to do a good job or this. On this, sometimes the why is this is a difficult client, and no matter what I do, things aren't going to go right. So the why is not always what you think it is, right? It's not always to get the highest dollar amount or whatever you might assume it could be. And usually I try to take some time and encourage people to try to build a rapport so that you can try to figure out what the why is. And sometimes people don't articulate their whys, right?
mhm.
But you can try to get that out of them. The
Yeah.
second thing that I think that people um, get wrong often is not knowing when to walk away. Which is
Mm,
why my foundational five, the fifth thing that you have to know as a negotiator to be a good negotiator is when to close. Like,
yeah.
you don't want to spend 10 days negotiating like a $50 change in a contract, right? You could
Right.
have been working on something else, or you don't want to concede too much, or maybe you're negotiating with the person who doesn't have the authority. Like people asking my kids if they could do something. They can't make decisions. They're children, right? They can't tell you what's going to happen next. You have to talk to an adult, right? And I say that as a joke, but I mean, sometimes that really happens. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think knowing when to close is so key because you can know what you want, know what you need, know how to actively listen, know how to communicate, but not know when to walk away. And all
Yeah.
of the other things that you've worked on could have been for naught
Yeah.
because you didn't know when to close. So I think those would be the two things that I think people sometimes get wrong or often get wrong
Mhm.
in a negotiation.
And in the book, you don't have to give us all the juicy stuff in the book, but in the book, you must give some suggestions about how to know when to walk away. And there must be several different scenarios, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, yes. At the end of each chapter, I have what's called negotiation in real life toolkit,
Mm,
where you can kind of go to the back and kind of see the major takeaways. And in the section about knowing when to close, I do list like common reasons that people don't know when to close.
right.
And some of those reasons could be, if you asking yourself a few questions, right? Did you get everything you wanted? Did you get everything you needed? Did you concede too much? Is there more information needed? Did you learn something that changed how you view or evaluate the transaction? Like there are many ways that
Mhm.
you might want to, stick a pin in it or walk away or buy some more time, depending on what's going on. It really depends on the
Yeah.
situation, but that can help you in a lot of ways. And I will say this because this has come up for me recently, and I've seen it come up for a lot of people, especially during this time of the year, right? When things are starting to wrap up and you're in the fourth quarter. And I think what's important is something that my mom says, which is, and this is, she says this saying, and I'm sure she didn't invent it. Maybe it came from my grandmother. We come from a line of women who say a lot of great sayings, but protection is God's protection. And
Mhm.
what I love about that is sometimes you don't know why something didn't go through, right? And
Mm,
even for me, like I love mediating and I have a pretty high track record of helping
mhm.
people resolve their matters, but I don't resolve every single matter, right? And if there's a situation where I don't, like I ask myself, I kind of think about it like, oh, what could I have done differently? Or if I didn't get something that I really wanted, right? Why didn't I get that? Like, or if there's a rejection for whatever reason, but then you may learn later that there was a reason that that wasn't meant for you, that there was something else bigger that was in store.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's, the protection part. So I think it's important too to think about closing as sometimes you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what's around the corner. You don't know why something isn't working, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Just to tell yourself that's okay. Rejection is God's protection, or rejection is protection,
Mhm.
however you see it. And I just
Yeah.
love that idea.
Mhm. And because it might be, an opportunity is gonna it's making room for something new to come in. And I know like there's a couple of times in my life where I wanted a certain position and got shortlisted and then didn't get it. And it was devastating. But then a few months later, something else came along that was a really big, part of my life. So
Yes.
that's good advice to have for people. Um, what about the negotiation? We're going to get into some everyday things and things we're going to face at the holidays. So I want to ask you about that. But let's just see. Can you just tell us what you mean in your book by negotiation superpowers? A little bit about
I
that?
love it. Yeah, so this kind of goes to a few things. One, people just if they don't think they're a negotiator, if they don't think they're a good negotiator, what I wanted to do was demystify a little bit, like what makes someone a good negotiator, and
Mhm,
taking the word negotiation out of the picture for a moment.
mhm,
What are your superpowers? What is something that you think that you do well? What is something that someone else thinks you do well? That's not always the same, right? Someone might say, "Oh, you're really patient." You might be like, "I'm not patient at all," right? Or someone might say, "You're a really good, public speaker," or you explain things very well, or you
mhm.
see the big picture, or you see the little picture, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or you might think, "I'm a really good listener. I listen to people." Or you might say, "I'm an empath," right? I feel what people feel. So I think it's really important to identify what you think your superpowers are and then create more opportunities for those superpowers to be on display. People who are
Mhm.
excellent at cooking or they try to find more opportunities to cook or to bake. I'm not a baker. You're not going to see me like baking things for people. It's not my superpower. That being said, there are things that I know I do very well, and I try to find more opportunities to be in that environment to kind of showcase the things that I think I do well, or people have told me that I do well. Now, on the
Right.
flip side of that, Gail, that I think is really important that I don't think many people do is think about how to expand your toolkit. So maybe you're like, I do these three things really well. Okay, that's great. And you know that, and maybe someone's told you that's great. But what about the things that people have told you you don't do well or that you don't think you do well? And how can you find where those things could be seen as a superpower? So it's a different way to expand your toolkit because maybe you've kind of put those things to the side. My grandfather used to tell me that I talk too much. Well, now I get paid to be a public speaker, to be a keynote speaker, right? So I've
Yeah,
put that to good use,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and so that's the point is not just thinking about what you do well as a superpower, but also thinking about what you don't think you do well, what someone has told you you don't do well, and how can you reframe that to add it to the list of superpowers.
So that when you're in negotiation for something, you can bring forth these things that you do really well. Is
Yes.
that why you list them? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And you know what they are, and you can go
Yeah.
to them with ease. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of one thing, and part of the whole impetus of this program and the why it's called Love Sweet Love because of the song and focusing on good things. And um, I found out years ago when I was studying positive psychology that my number one strength, there's 21 character strengths. And I had my eye on a couple of strengths. Like I saw a zest on the list, and I thought, yeah, I'm so zesty. I know I'm going to get zest as one of my top strengths. And there's I don't know, prudence and judgment and um, communication and all these things. And I ended up getting love was my number one strength. And I was so disappointed when I got that. It's like, God, what am I going to do with that skill? But, long story short, it made me over the years think about my strengths and know that this is one of my superpowers. And the
Mm.
second one was perspective. And so it just made me focus on trying to use those more in my life and just admit that this warmth and love that I appreciate and have is something that is one of my gifts. And I just have to accept it and mourn that it's not zest and so when I'm in, people know that about me. And so it's focusing on, for me, it would be focusing on building relationships in the team and, making people feel they belong and welcome. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. And a lot of people don't think about what their strengths are. So that's great. I hope people get your book. It'll be fantastic. So, okay, so we're moving into this sometimes very stressful time of year. And sometimes we see, I think can be stressful in so many ways, right? Obviously, grief even comes up, right? Like we're mourning someone who's not there. So there's that kind of stress. I think for the purpose of this podcast today, well, I guess, that comes into it too. But, we've got all these people, all these differing opinions. And one thing that comes up for me when I think about these big gatherings is someone who triggers you. If
Mm.
you know you're going to be coming into contact with someone, that maybe you don't see that often. It's not, you wouldn't choose necessarily to like hang out with them, but they're going to be there. You want to be polite. Maybe you're hosting. And is there something we can do to prepare to be around someone we know is going to trigger us?
Absolutely. And let me just say, people who know you best know exactly how to push your buttons, right? They know exactly
Mhm.
how to do it. And
Yeah.
so I think that there are many ways to sort of approach the season with intention.
Mm,
And one powerful way to do that is by using this acronym that I call CHEER. And I love an acronym because it makes it easy to remember, especially when you have a lot going on, even if you're hosting, because it's just a simple roadmap to help you stay calm, kind, and connected, no matter what the dinner
mm,
table throws at your way. And
mm,
so for the C is choose connection over being right.
mm.
Choose connection over being right. I know that sounds easier said than done,
No,
but
it doesn't.
heated topic, right, right, Gil? But when
Mm,
a heated topic comes up, whether it's politics, parenting, or who makes the best, apple pie, just
right.
pause before reacting. So
Mhm,
ask yourself, is this helping me connect or compete? And there are many things you can ask yourself, but I like that one because it's very clear,
Yeah.
right? It's a very clear
Mhm.
way to just kind of quickly test yourself. And if it's the latter, if it's to compete, take a breath and choose connection. One of my close friends, she's so wonderful. She says, what I like about you, Damali, is that you choose joy. Like I see it. When I see you every day, like you wake up and you choose joy. And for you, Gail, I'm hearing that you choose love. Like that's just something
Mhm.
that's inherent in your DNA, that's your makeup. And
Yeah.
so but other people can choose connection, right? You can
Mhm.
say, you know what? We see that differently, and that's okay. I'm just glad we're here together. So you're not
Mm.
conceding, you're preserving the peace. And that's why I start off with that C of choosing connection over being right. The age is to have a soft start. And I
Mm.
say soft start because the way you open a conversation can set the tone
Mm.
for how it ends, right?
Ooh, I
And
like that.
so, right,
Mm.
and we know this to be true. And so instead of diving into sensitive territory, start
Mhm.
with curiosity and care. So trying, how have you been holding up this year, or what's been the highlight of your week, right? So
Mhm.
just like a gentle start that invites warmth instead of defensiveness,
Mhm.
and that gives the person the opportunity to decide to what they want to share with you, right? And I
Mm.
think that's great because you kind of give agency back to someone. And maybe in the past that hasn't been your way. So maybe they're already kind of tense or gearing up for, what you
Yeah.
think you might say. But you're going to show them the new you. You're going to show them that you are going to have a soft start. And if you sense tension, kind of lower your voice, not your standards. And then please, please, people, read the cues, right? So if someone is showing you a discomfort about a particular topic, I think it's
Mm.
really important to take that cue and change the topic. I think it's so important. Sometimes people kind of keep going when there is enough either micro expressions or energy or just indicators that maybe that's not the road you should travel down today, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna Robert Frost it, right? So you got that might not be the road. Let's travel. You got to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's important. So I there and of course in cheer I have three more letters, but I wanted to
Yeah.
pause to kind of see if I can keep going
Yeah.
or
I'd like you to keep going, actually. That's
yeah.
great.
So for the first E in cheer, this is one of my favorite ones. Empathize, don't evangelize. So when someone shares a strong opinion, resist the urge to persuade or prove a point. Because empathy doesn't mean agreement, it means acknowledgement. And I think that's something that gets lost a lot. Like people often think that you have to agree if you empathize because you understand, right? You can understand where someone's coming from. But what if you don't? What if you can't relate to the
Yeah.
experience? What if it never happened to you, or you just, I don't know, you're not the CEO, you're not the chief empathy officer, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe, maybe
Yeah.
no. So if you think about empathy as meaning acknowledgement and not agreement, then for people who are not naturally empathetic, you can be empathetic in the moment. So for
Mm.
example, if someone says, I can't believe you still live in the city, try responding with, it definitely has its challenges, but I love the energy, or I love people watching, or I love the food, or I love 24-hour convenience, right? So basically, you're still modeling grace under pressure while keeping the door open for understanding. And so
Mm.
empathy is important. So empathize, don't evangelize. The next E,
Damali, can I ask you just before you go
yeah.
into the next one, what if somebody says something that you like instead of you being the one talking, what if someone says something to you that you don't agree with, or like how can you show empathy? Would you just reflect back their feeling like, oh, I can see you feel really strongly about that? Or what kind of, do you have a couple of examples about that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it depends on what's being said and it depends on who you want to be in that moment, right?
Uh,
Because sometimes and we're talking about holiday gatherings or gathering with people that, maybe I think what you said was that maybe you wouldn't choose to spend time with this person, but you're in the same space. Or maybe, you're often in the same space with this person and now you like find yourself getting punch at the same time and you're filling your cup and you have like 30 seconds or a couple minutes to have an interaction. So if someone says something to you that rubs you the wrong way, and in a moment I'm going to talk about 5 topics to avoid because
okay, good, good, good.
oftentimes we can kind of sidestep some conflict.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think there are a few things that you have to consider. one, going back to how do you, one, going back to do you choose to connect or compete, right?
Mhm.
I can't tell you, there's so many situations where I'm in conversations with someone and it may seem like, oh, maybe they're oversharing or they're giving a unpopular opinion or
Yeah,
the recent political, race results or
yeah.
whatever the case may be. And in that moment, while you can't control what the person is saying to you, you can control what you say next. So there are a lot of neutral things you can say, right?
Mhm.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Or you can keep them
Yeah.
talking. Tell me more about that, right? Sometimes
Mm.
people love to talk. Maybe they just spent the last 10 days reading, articles and they have this like topic that they're going to talk to everybody about because now they feel like
Yeah.
really good about it. And
Mhm.
so there are many ways that you can keep someone talking or just say, oh, wow, I didn't know about that or that sounds interesting or or
Yeah.
one of my favorites is just, like not saying anything. Hmm.
Yeah,
You know,
good.
and, so there are many ways to keep the peace. The point is, it depends on what you want. Now, sometimes
Mhm.
it's your arch nemesis, right? Sometimes it's
Yeah.
the person who pushes your buttons, and you've
Mhm.
been ready. You know what they're going to come and talk to you
Yeah,
about. Maybe they're going to brag on everything their kid just did, right? Maybe
yeah,
they're going to talk about their new job. Who knows what it's going to be? So it just depends, again, how you want to show up in that moment.
yeah.
My goal for cheer is how to keep the peace. So the tips that I'm providing in this acronym are
Mhm.
focused on keeping the peace. Now, I could definitely have a different acronym for for not keeping the peace.
I might wanna hear that one too.
I want to keep that one handy too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what's the second E? I interrupted you there.
Yeah, no worries. The second E is to exit gracefully, which goes back to knowing when to close,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes the best way to protect your peace is to politely step away. So you
Mm.
can change the topic, you can
Mhm.
redirect the conversation, or you can physically remove yourself for a breather. And there are many ways to do this. I talk about this in my book about protecting your peace and how important it is.
Mhm.
There are other authors that have written about different ways to do this. Fisher and Yuri talk about going to the balcony to get some space and to
Yeah.
think. There are many ways to do it. I think there you could do a lot of things. Oh, excuse me, I promise to help refill the drinks, or I'm gonna go check on the kids, or I really have to excuse myself to run to the ladies' room. Like all of
Mhm.
those work perfectly. It doesn't
Mhm.
put you in an awkward position,
Mhm.
and it gives you an opportunity to exit gracefully. And
Mhm.
exiting gracefully keeps things light without escalating tension. Now, we've
Mhm.
all been in those situations where the person waits for you to come out of the bathroom, like,
Yeah, right, right. Oh
right?
god.
And so, you can try your best um, to figure out ways to avoid going back to a conversation that you didn't want to be in. But something that's
Yeah,
key is once you do exit, that might give you a chance to think of what to say or do next, right? I can't
right.
give people a framework for every scenario, every possible scenario,
Yeah, yeah,
because this is more of an art than a science. But what
yes.
it can do is give you a chance to sort of, use neuroscience, let your executive function kind of take control instead of you fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because it's kind of
Yeah,
like a fight, right? You're trying to get out of there.
yeah,
And then you could think about how to react.
right.
Maybe that's when you get your buddy, like whoever your friend is, and now you're
Yeah,
not alone in that conversation, or there are different things to
yeah.
do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And do you wanna tell us what the R is?
Yeah, the R is to redirect. And so the quickest way to stop a spiral is to
Mhm.
pivot towards neutral shared ground. So when things get uncomfortable, redirect with like a lighthearted question or shared memory. And so,
Mm.
those have a great way of defusing tension, Gil. So,
Mm.
let's not talk about politics. Tell me about your last vacation. Or you could say,
Mm.
remember the time the turkey caught fire? Um, and you see how you laugh? Laughter
Yeah.
is a reset for a lot of these like family
Mm.
or kind of
That's
social
good.
dynamics, right? So laughter helps laughing at yourself, laughing at some shared
Mm.
memory, or and if even if they said, "Oh, I don't remember," oh, you got to hear the story, right?
Yeah.
You go into that. And so I alluded to earlier kind of a quick cheat sheet for what not to discuss. And
Mhm.
those are the 5 Ps. And I think people know a lot of the Ps, politics,
Mhm.
paychecks, parenting, partners. a personal appearance, right? That one I
Oh,
think
yes.
it doesn't always make the list, but
Yeah.
those are conversation landmines and they
Mm,
tend to explode when they're gatherings. And
mhm,
so I want people to think about shifting the focus, to gratitude, travel, food, music, or funny stories,
mm,
anything that builds connection instead of comparison.
that's great advice. Love that. Gratitude, food, travel. What was the other thing you said?
Music or funny
Music.
stories. And
Okay.
oftentimes, like something, it could be, you can go as far back in time as you want, but
Yeah.
within the past year, especially if you gather annually or
Yeah.
it's kind of, within the last year,
Great
these are some
idea.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it reminds me of this is the ultimate time where we were shifting, trying to shift gears a little was when my mom passed away about 2 years ago, and we were all around her in her care room, and we knew it was going to be soon, and sounds sounds maybe strange to some people that we were laughing, but we had spent many days with her. She knew it was going to happen. We were all there and we were sharing really funny stories about her and she was laughing and it just made the whole thing this beautiful time together. And
Hmm.
I think she loved it because it was like, I remember my thinking was, how can we let her know that we haven't forgotten all of these things? Sorry.
Yeah. I know, what a beautiful story, and I love that. And I'm
It
sorry to
really
hear about
worked
your
well.
mom.
Thank you.
Okay.
Um, what about some preemptive things? I mean, knowing those things to avoid, that's something we can do. Um, things that we can try to do to keep the tone positive. I guess you've already talked about a lot of those, but even in like if we're hosting,
Hmm.
I'm really big into gathering and the art of hosting and things like that. So is there anything as a host that you can think of, like music or, are there things like that that we can focus on that will help us move into the right kind of situation and tone that we want?
Absolutely. So if you're hosting, I think boundaries are your best friend. And so
Mm,
you can share your expectations up front. So some things that are important, like start and end times, or if you have certain
yeah.
practices at your home, like the shoes stay at the door,
Mm,
because sometimes people can start off on the wrong foot. Like they could
yes.
everything be good, and then they're like, I have to take my shoes off. So everything they
Mm,
prepared for whatever they were going to bring, they have their presents, they plan the outfit, and the outfit includes wearing the shoes. And then
yeah.
from that moment on, they're like, "Oh, I didn't wear matching socks, or I have a like whatever." And so,
Oh, that's true.
but it's true.
It
Something
is
that
true.
small can change the energy,
Yeah.
going forward. And so I think some people, and oftentimes conflict starts from something small, Gail.
Mm,
People, I mean, it doesn't usually like, become this avalanche, or it
mm,
could become an avalanche, but it's
yeah.
often something that's very small and that could be misperceived by the other side because maybe they have a lot going on and
Hmm.
saying whatever energy is
Yeah.
being projected or shown as something to do with something else, but it could be something as small as, I wish I had known I was going to have to take my shoes off at the door. I
That's
would have put lotion on. I would
yeah.
have put matching socks. And so I
Done my
think,
toenails. Yeah.
yeah, what
Yeah.
I didn't get a pedicure.
Yeah.
I didn't have time, and now everyone's going to see
Hmm.
my feet, or I didn't
Yeah.
know there was a theme, and I'm not wearing the right color, and why didn't you tell me? Or I don't check my email, and you send me a text. Like small things that can have a
Mm,
big impact. And so I would say it's really important to share the expectations up front. Start in time. Even if you can, some people say, "Oh, I have something else to do before. I might be late." Tell people when you plan to provide certain aspects of the meal.
right.
So if this is cocktails and hors d'oeuvres in the first hour. Tell people because maybe they're going to get there or they have to go somewhere else and they can plan based on the information. So as a
Mm,
host, and I host a lot, I think it's really important to give people kind of some information,
yeah.
so that they can make decisions. So you don't
Mm,
have to respond to, oh, is it too late to come as you're hosting, right? Or
yeah.
or I have to go. Oh, I already know.
Mm,
And then creating an atmosphere where everyone feels included and no one feels sort of cornered. And I think it's
mhm,
important to set the tone by saying, this year the theme is laughter and light, no debates,
mm,
just dessert, right? And so
mm,
that way, if someone brings up something, in a conversation. So two people are talking off to the side, and someone's like, brings up something that's a debate topic. The person can actually then point to the host, not like literally, but to
Yeah.
say, Damali said we just want to, keep things light and no debates, and that sounds like a debate. So,
Yeah.
let's not do that. So it gives you something else to point to. I
Mm,
also think that this is something that I've always felt, and maybe because I'm the oldest and I come from a very big family, is that
yeah.
everyone who's meant to be there will be there. And sometimes I feel like people are disappointed. And I'm not talking about those who we've loved and lost. I'm talking about people who send their regrets, like they can't make it. And people might be like, oh,
Yeah.
like focusing on that. And remember, rejection can sometimes be God's protection. And also,
Hmm.
sometimes it's just whoever's supposed to be there will be there, was meant to be, will happen. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just sort of focusing on controlling what you can control
Yeah.
and letting go what you can't. And I
Mhm.
think that that is a mindset, Gail. I think that's something that's a mindset. I didn't come here to preach, but I feel like I'm preaching today.
No,
But it's
no.
kind of a mindset.
Yeah.
Mm. And if you're hosting, I feel like, the last thing I'll say about this is at the end of the day, keeping the cheer and ditching drama isn't about perfection because I know like when I'm hosting too, and probably you like
Yeah.
gathering, is you're
Yeah.
thinking about like all the things and
Yeah.
did I check the soap in the
Yeah.
bathroom to make sure it's the right quantity? Did I change
Yeah.
this? Is the
Yeah.
food cooked perfectly? But to me, gathering, especially the older I get, isn't about perfection, it's about presence. And so when
Mm,
you're choosing empathy over ego, when you're choosing laughter over lectures, when you're choosing kindness over control, what happens
mm,
is you transform the gathering from stressful to more soulful, right? And what I like
mm.
about that is that those are things you can control. You can try to control. And look, if people don't, behave, then don't invite them next year.
Oh, that's such good advice. Those are, I love those. Can you say those six things over again? You said empathy over
Yeah,
ego.
yeah, empathy over ego, laughter over lectures, kindness over control.
Oh, those
You
are
see the
just,
alliteration. I was an English major at Spelman.
yeah,
Love
that's
alliteration. That's
right.
how you remember. That's how I remember, at least.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Love a good alliteration. Absolutely. Okay, so I think we will move on to the quote. So,
Yeah.
anything else you want to say that about gathering or before we on the holidays that I didn't ask you about so far?
No, I love the
That's good.
questions. And I think if
Okay.
people remember cheer, that will give them a good
Yeah,
frame.
love that. Okay. All right. Here's the quote that I picked for you, and it is from Peter Senge. And it says, to listen fully means to pay close attention to what is being said beneath the words. You listen not only to the music, but to the essence of the person speaking. You listen not only for what someone knows, but for what he or she is. Ears operate at the speed of sound, which is far slower than the speed of light the eyes take in. Generative listening is the art of developing deeper silences in yourself so you can slow our minds hearing to your ears' natural speed and hear beneath the words to their meaning. So I'd love you to comment on that in any way you wish, Damali.
I love that quote, and it's so rich with so many things, from thinking about silence, so the space between the sounds, between the talking,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the how ears work and how like listening can really, if you listen closely, can really help you figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as someone who's a conflict resolver, someone who focuses on conflict resolution, management, and prevention, to me, my main takeaway from that quote and how I kind of process it in my conflict resolution brain is if
Mm-hmm.
we all focus more on fostering love and connection, we live in a world where curiosity replaces judgment. And I think that's so important
Mm-hmm.
because I think that oftentimes judgment becomes sort of like and I snap my fingers because like we know about snap judgments and it
Yes.
happens so quickly. And if we were curious instead of judgy, and I know judgy isn't like the word that I should use, but if we're more curious,
Yeah.
then we'd pause before we reacted,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd ask what happened instead of who's to blame. And I don't
Mm,
think conflict would disappear, Gail, but it would look different because it will become an opportunity to connect, to grow, and to understand rather than to win or lose. And I say that because I've practiced law, I'm a mediator, I'm an arbitrator, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a big sister, I'm a friend, I'm in many organizations, and I feel like sometimes things feel very adversarial, meaning
mm,
someone has to win or lose. Someone has to be right or wrong. That
mm,
this whole nuance of gray doesn't seem to exist, and people can be really stuck. And so to me, in that kind of a world where people were more curious than judgy, based on this wonderful quote, I think workplaces could be more inclusive, relationships could be more resilient, and communities could be more peaceful because not all people agree all the time,
yeah.
but they can listen all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I love about that quote.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And curiosity is a big one. And I think you really just answered the next question. The last two questions I always give people is if we focused on um, more on our fostering love and connection, like we have today through listening and empathy, what do you think we'd see more of? And I think you kind of just answered that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more curiosity, less judgment,
Mm,
more listening, less fighting, more recognizing nuances, and also context. Context is so important. I think sometimes people this rush to judgment because they're missing some context. I think sometimes people don't always say what they mean, and people don't always mean what they say. And I think if people focus on connecting and not, judging or what I call triangulating, so if instead of understanding a misinterpretation or miscommunication from the person directly who's involved, but then triangulating, going to talk about it with someone else, like
mhm,
that's not the best way to be curious, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so that's probably what I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And there's one more question that I ask everybody, but just before that and before we end, I just want to say thank you for this work that you do and for sharing all of this knowledge that really it's it's kind of simple in a way, but it's not something that people I think we feel rushed and pressured and time is always pushing at us and all these distractions. So so much of what I've heard from you today is stopping and responding rather than reacting and listening for understanding and I think understand I always write about and talk about how understanding builds empathy.
Mm.
And there's one quote maybe you've heard this before. I think you'd like this, but I think it was Dr. Michelle Borba said, empathy makes cruelty and violence unthinkable. And
Hmm.
I think that's true. And it's really simplifying things, but just think, just imagine if we all had empathy like that. We wouldn't even think about being violent and cruel to each other. So I just love all of this and that acronym cheer we will take away with us for sure. So just to end, Damali, what are one or two thoughts you hope people listening take away from this conversation today?
Well, I hope first that listeners take away that negotiation isn't just something you do in a boardroom. It's something that you do every day with your colleagues, with your family, and even yourself. So that's number one. And
Mhm.
number two, that you, listener, you are your greatest asset. So when you bring your authentic self to the table, your story, your voice, your values, you don't just get what you want, you help others to do the same.
Mm, thank you. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, Damali.
It was my pleasure, Gail. I want to do this same time tomorrow. I can.
I love it. I love it. Gonna stop this.